Meanwhile, government has welcomed an initiative by African heads of state to facilitate efforts to end Russia's war on Ukraine. President Cyril Ramaphosa yesterday confirmed a delegation will travel to both countries in the next month as part of efforts to bring about peace. Leaders from Zambia, Senegal, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Uganda, Egypt and South Africa will be part of this mission. Government says it is still concerned about how the conflict is increasing food insecurity in Africa. Let's talk about this further. Bring in Wits University International Relations Professor John Stremlau. Professor, a very good evening to you. I'm grateful for your time. I wonder if almost a week ago, when the allegations of South Africa arming Russia was swelling about, there could have been any prediction that we'd be sitting here tonight with this country now part of an African delegation that's going to try and mediate in the situation between Russia and Ukraine.
Well, this is always an unfolding drama, but I'm not surprised that African leaders have taken it upon themselves to mediate. They talked about it a great deal, and of that 6, 3 are so-called non-aligned, and 3 are supporting the territorial integrity and sovereign equality of Ukraine. And the statement from our government this morning said that they called it a devastating conflict in Ukraine, but it didn't assign blame, as its habit to do is not to assign blame, but that the impact of the conflict was hurting Africa. So today, surprise, surprise, Erdogan of Turkey is able to report that the Russians have agreed to ship more grain, allow more Ukrainian grain to go out and into the marketplace. We'll see if that comes to pass, but it's a good sign. And I don't want to be negative about African initiative. I just am skeptical that the conflict is ripe for a settlement right now.
And I wonder why then, yes, Africa is directly impacted. Parts of the continent are affected, for example, when there are issues with the movement of grain from Ukraine, right? So there's a direct impact there where indeed it's in the interest of leaders from the continent to make some effort to bring about peace between the Russians and the Ukrainians. The Chinese had tried to put forward a peace plan. Nothing's turned on that so far. What would give Africa the edge, I wonder, at this point, to allow for progress, a step forward towards peace, even if it's not a cessation of hostilities altogether?
Well, you mentioned the Chinese. Now, they have real leverage over Russia, and it would seem to me that the Chinese are reappraising constantly. And we had a report out of Vienna last week that Jake Sullivan, who's very close to Biden, the national security advisor, and Wang Li, who is the senior-most diplomat and very close to Xi Jinping in the Chinese foreign affairs community, they had a very cordial and constructive, according to the U.S. Press release, frank and all of the right terms, a discussion of the Ukraine war, of the South China Sea, of economic issues and inflation. They covered the waterfront, and that was very constructive and seemed to be positive. So maybe if the Africans can break the ice, then the Chinese could weigh in at the BRICS summit and maybe get some progress. But it's going to take a lot of strong arming of Vladimir Putin, because he's not consolidated his controls over the 3 provinces in the Donbass that he's annexed, and he's not winning at all well in the war. And I just saw a report today that he's buying more drones from Iran, and I suspect that what was loaded into the Lady R was equipment that would guide drones and other things which were agreed to by the Committee on Conventional Arms back in 2019. So I'm just speculating here, but that's all part of this puzzle.
Right. And there's always been, for the last year and a bit, speculation or analysis that suggests that in order for the conflict to come to an end, the invasion to end, there need to be compromises on either side. Today we're hearing, The Guardian was reporting this evening that, in fact, what's happened now in a meeting with a Chinese envoy, excuse me, Prof, the Ukrainians said that they would not agree to any peace plan that involves them ceding or giving up territory to the Russians, or this becoming a frozen conflict. But what compromises, I wonder, could an African delegation get them both to make? Because that's likely to be the sticking point, is it not?
Well, it can take the temperature of the conflict and report back. So I don't want to prejudice the outcome of that. I applaud any effort to try to bring about a peace agreement. However, my own view of this, and having read as much as I could on the conflict, is that it's not ripe for a resolution, but it could be toward the end of the year. And then it might be incumbent upon the NATO powers and the West and the U.S. to lean on Zelensky, and it might be incumbent upon the Chinese to lean on Russia and see whether or not you can bridge the gap and get a viable ceasefire and a viable peace agreement that would restore the status quo ante of some sort and protect the independence and sovereignty of Ukraine that was the subject of 2 treaties between Ukraine and Russia that Putin violated.
And it's interesting and worth noting, is it not, Professor, that even though much has been made about South Africa and some saying the country's non-aligned statement on the issue around Russia invading Ukraine is not true in the essence of what non-alignment would mean. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky still held what appeared to have been a very polite phone conversation over the weekend with President Ramaphosa, and we're hearing is open to intervention that would include South Africa. So the Ukrainians, it suggests, are still trusting of Pretoria.
Well, as I said before, Uganda, Congo, and South Africa are among those that abstained on the resolutions at the UN, and Zambia, Senegal, and Egypt all voted for the resolutions, and that's a good mix of 3 and 3. But we'll see what happens. The South African government has said that the South Africans are not leading this, but they are going to be able to bring the findings of the African leaders to the BRICS summit, and we'll see whether or not the Chinese can be persuaded to lean on the Russians.
Do you think this will get Western support?
Well, it would if Zelensky is agreeable. Don't forget, the West completely underestimated the nationalism and resistance and the penalty that the Ukrainian people would incur for the sake of their national independence and sovereign equality and protection. And they want to desperately join the European Union and become more as part of the global democracies of communities. And their recent prosecution of some corruption on the part of a justice is symptomatic of a country that wants to do better. And I wish them well in that struggle. But the invasion was brutal, and it still is brutal. And the people who are suffering the most are obviously the Ukrainians.
Professor John Stremlau, a pleasure to speak to you. Thank you so much for your time tonight.